I got to go back to Instagram. I'm trying to figure out how to get it to live video.
Yeah, I know we did it last time, but I don't remember exactly how it went.
I don't think it worked, but I'm going to try.
I know it worked on Instagram, but I don't remember if it went to YouTube or not. Trying to see if you're live on Instagram right now.
That's the one I have the most trouble with. It says all you got to do is click go live here, but it takes me right back to what I don't want. I don't know.
I'm not tech savvy either.
I know, man. I'm not either. I'm going to give it one more shot. No, it's still doing the same thing. I didn't close the window, and it says all you have to do is click go live.
Yeah, it doesn't show you streaming on Instagram, but
that's nothing new. Live video. All right, let me hit live again. Live. Public. Next.
Let's see if you're going. If it shows you live on YouTube, man. Oh, it does. Yeah.
Is it
9,000 on YouTube? It is not. I don't see it on Instagram yet, but
9,000.
You're at 9,000 subscribers on YouTube now, man. That's what's up.
Yeah, dude, it's going crazy. Okay, so it said copy the stream key again, but where the hell do I put it? Hey, what's up? Whoever, the one person who's in here, I apologize because I'm like handicapped on these things. I don't know. We'll do YouTube and not worry about it.
Yeah, you can always make reels later.
Exactly.
They seem to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, man. How you been?
Pretty good. I got engaged yesterday. I don't know if you saw that on Instagram. So
I did not see that. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. But other than that, just working. It's been chaos. It's basically been hot here in Texas since February. So,
well, that's one thing I got to give everybody a heads up. I got a fan going right now. So if there's a little more background noise than normal, because it's hotter than the third level of hell in Florida right now. So I'm running some breeze through here. And
yeah, I don't hear anything. So you should be good.
That's cool. I can see it on the mic, but maybe it won't be too bad for the people. Fly Tire Mike, what's up from Pennsylvania? Good to have you in, brother.
That's awesome. Pennsylvania. Probably not so hot over there.
You never know, man. It can get pretty hot up north too, especially this time of year. But all right, so let me do a formal intro. We got Garrett Stamport, fisheries biologist from Texas A&M. And for any new followers, Garrett came out and did an electrofishing survey for me because I don't own an electrofishing boat anymore. Actually, I think that's probably the last time I'm going to get on one.
You say that until we come back again.
The shine wore off that chrome for me a long time ago. Mike says it was 90 in Pennsylvania today. So, yeah, it was about the same here, Mike. It's pretty hot.
Not too bad. We cooled off a little bit after the hurricane. So we're back to 90 instead of 98.
So you got power, obviously. You're not, I guess that hit Houston though, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm in Montgomery, so it still went right over us, but it hit Houston a lot harder. We got power back on Wednesday, so 2 days without it. But we have a generator, so that helped.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so anybody who doesn't know Garrett, he's a fishery scientist too. And actually, let's just start off with what you got going, man. You've got some new ponds you stocked recently. Run that down.
Yeah, so we've done a few. Some of them are going to be kind of standard stocking like you did in Clint's Pond. We're stocking, we stocked those this spring, make sure it has good water quality. We're feeding. And then next summer or, around June, we'll follow up with young of the year bass, fry, and all of those. But we did have one unique situation that we had been kind of talking about. And that's part of the reason why we're, doing this live show where we're accelerating that process, and we're basically have to simulate what would happen over the course of a year in a condensed time frame. Over the course of a few months, we have to recreate that forage structure that would have occurred naturally over the course of a year in a few months, because this client is a little less patient on, his goals. He wants to get there right now. He doesn't want to have to wait if he doesn't have to, and he has the financials to back that up. So it's not something that a lot of people do just because it's a little bit cost prohibitive, but it'll be exciting to see. The bass went in, probably 3 weeks ago now. So I'm curious to see how they're looking, but I imagine they're growing pretty good. So
yeah, you're gonna be fine, man. And if you guys have been following my page, we put the bluegill in and let them go almost a year, just kind of filling the pond up. And what Garrett's talking about is filling the pond up initially right before you put the bass in, and then putting the bass in and kind of skipping that whole year-long process. And that's where the extra cost comes in. But I've actually done that many times. And like you mentioned, we broke that down privately. And I think you're right on track. That's kind of what I've always done as well. Sometimes you've got to do it that way, like you said, because the client requests it.
Right.
They got the paper and they don't care, and they would rather have it done quicker. So you kind of overwhelm the pond with the forage right off the jump, and then give it. I've done it even a week or two just in advance. I think you had a little more time than that, but
yeah, we had about 3.5 months, so not terrible. We were trying to give it as much time as we possibly could between, introducing the forage and the bass. But yeah, we got the thing's loaded down, man. He's loving it just from the fact that he can go catch bluegill on every cast. So
yeah,
he's already excited about it. But yeah, like you were saying, some people, everyone's goals are a little bit different. Everyone's timeline's a little bit different. We have a few people that are older and that, don't necessarily want to wait an extra year. I don't want to say for no reason, because obviously there's a good reason in doing that. We see what happens all the time when people stock all their fish at the same time and they don't plan appropriately, or stock bass too early when the forage base isn't ready. But in their mind, letting the pond sit for a year, if it doesn't have to, is kind of a waste of time, because they're trying to catch bigger fish sooner than later. And, I feel like the difficulty in that is your results are a little less predictable. Like you're stocking forage, waiting a year, that's tried and true over and over and over and over again. But when you have a little bit less predictability when you're doing it at an accelerated rate, so that's when you really probably should consult with a biologist, so you have everything dialed in as perfect as possible before doing that, rush strategy.
Yeah, I agree. Mike's coming in with a question. How big is the pond that you stocked?
So it's 5 acres. So nothing crazy, but big enough to grow big fish.
Oh, so. Yeah. You can definitely grow some nice fish in 5 acres of water. Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. If you're going to go advanced, you're probably going to need a little bit of help, and you're definitely going to spend a little bit more money.
Oh yeah.
But you're going to get you're gonna get quick results. And really my experience with it has been, as long as you kind of kick the pond off right, you almost can't mess it up, but you got to do it right.
Right.
If you do it wrong, you can mess it up right from the beginning, and the results it'll just tank on you, and you won't get good results. You'll have a bunch of 1-pound bass, and they won't be holding good relative weights. Year 2 and 3, it's pretty obvious that you've made a mistake, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right. And you see that all the time with those, like the pre-planned pond packages that are sold, where it's like you stock it all at once, you get 300 bluegill, 100 red ear, 100 bass, and 100 catfish, and they're like, here you go, this is what you need. And you get almost no results out of it. So it's a lot more complicated than just, here's a handful of fish, stick them in there. Well, I mean, you're not gonna, even if you let 300 bluegill go for a year and then put on 100 bass, you're probably not going to get very good growth rates off of that anyway. So
No, I usually go. I went up with about I usually go like 1,000, and you can even double that. But 1,000 per acre is usually my minimum on, and I'll break it up too. It'll be like I'll probably spend the least amount of money is on the smallest amount of smaller sizes of fish.
right.
So the 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 inch bluegill, you're going to get at a lot better cost. So a bulk of that 1,000 will be in that size fish, but I'm still going to do 200-300 fish in that 4 to 6 size class that will begin to spawn instantly for you and get reproduction in. And for those of you who don't know, Garrett went back in with you did fry, right?
Yeah,
You
so
didn't do
we stocked several different size classes. Like I said, we basically recreated what would happen in a year. So there's in
mm,
total there's like 5 different size classes, and within 2.5 months, those fry were already, or no, I said fry. The 1 to 3 inch fingerlings we put in there were already at like 4 inches.
right.
So they're basically, by the time the bass went in, pretty much every fish that's in that pond was spawning already. So
I got
it was in good shape to begin with because we had that little buffer. But yeah, you're right. There were adult fish that went in, and then we also had fingerlings go
you
in, and
you
then
staggered the entire forage base in
right,
at one time.
different size
Yeah,
classes.
yeah, yeah. And when I said fry, I meant you went in with bass fry
Oh
to be
yes,
to be
yeah,
clear. Yeah,
1 to 3 inch fish. So they
right.
were
And I would not recommend going bigger than that.
no,
I've seen people do that where they'll even if they stock the forage base correctly, like you're talking about, you've got every size class of bluegill that you spent money on and you stocked them, but then they go in with advanced bass, like 8 to 12 inch bass, whatever, and that'll depend on what the fish hatchery has available. But you don't want those advanced bass going in this scenario. I much prefer the small 1 to 3s and let them grow.
yeah, I
They'll
would agree, and I
they'll
see that like in some accelerated plans I've seen from other people, they use adult bluegill and an advanced bass, and I
mm-mm.
don't that doesn't make sense to me. I don't. I guess clients think if the bass go in bigger, they'll get bigger faster, but that's yet to be the case.
No, and I can address that from my experience is that when you get an 8 inch bass from a hatchery, you're actually dealing with like a fish that's like a year and a half old.
Right.
So we'll be able to grow those 1 to 3s that you stocked way faster than 8 inches than a year and a half. They're going to be 8 inches by the end of the summer, if not bigger than that.
Right.
The smaller fish grow much faster. And I would touched on this on Instagram, but not so much here on YouTube about that. Um, when I, if it's up to me and it's not, 100% up to me, I always do the 1 to 3 inch bass. I don't even fool with advanced bigger bass than that.
Yeah, we don't usually either. There's been a few scenarios where we've kind of had to put them in there, and
Mm,
we've talked about those too, where if we would have introduced fingerlings, the crappie population that was already in there would
right,
have smoked them.
right.
But it's not many situations, and that was already a pre-existing pond. We haven't had any new ponds where we've put advanced fish.
No,
So
I think that's smart. You're going to get the best growth. I think if I remember correctly, there's like an imprinting process that those fry will go through on that pond, and they just seem to go in and grow better. And that falls into the category too. I've had a lot of conversations about transporting bass. The people want to harvest some bass down, but then they immediately want to bring 6, 7, 8 pound bass in, and I don't recommend that.
yeah,
Uh,
because they almost always lose weight. I don't know if I've ever really heard of stories where they've been very successful in doing that. They either kind of maintain weight, maybe grow a little bit, or they die during transport,
yep.
or they lose weight because they were excelling in the environment that they were in, but they're
Hmm.
no longer excelling in the environment they got put into. So
Hmm.
it's yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to it seems logical, I think, to people who don't have any experience that the larger the fish that you put in, then the faster results you will get, but you actually won't. And I can back up what you said with years of experience in myself in transporting bass, like you said, in situations where you kind of have to.
Right.
And those are the only times that I really did transport adult fish or advanced fish, however you want to term, that. Um, you put them in, and even there's been several times that I actually tagged them and literally could say the fish went in at 5 and a year later was at 4. It did not grow. It lost weight, even though the entire forage base and the pond, it doesn't make sense why it doesn't grow. It should grow, but it doesn't.
Right. And you see that with new ponds with the fingerlings you stock in, like in Clint's pond, you have some that are hitting, 5 pounds, and you have some that are still at 3. Some just don't grow as fast as others. They don't excel as well in that environment. And that happens every time. And eventually those fish that lag behind get cold, so it's, you put a fish into a new environment, and if it's not for whatever reason, it doesn't do well, whether it's genetics or whatever, it just won't excel in that situation. So
yeah, I think you hit on it. It's like you're taking a bass from an environment where it could excel and has excelled to get to the size that it is, but you're moving it to a completely different environment that it's not familiar with. And even, like I said, even though you've done everything right and you've prepared that whole situation for that advanced fish, you're not going to get what you expected.
Right. And you could probably do that. You could take a bunch of fish and move them, the same group of fish, to different ponds over and over and over again, and different ones would do better each time you move them.
Yep.
That would probably, that would show a lot, but that would take a lot of work and a lot of time to do that, just to prove a point that is probably not really that valuable, to where it would be worth that much time input to prove it.
Well, yeah. And that's where I would hope that people would just kind of trust my experience on that, because I kind of went to the school of hard knocks on that one. Where I had thousands of acres of fishery, of ponds and small lakes that I was managing, and those guys would literally pay me nice money. Let's put the bigger fish in here, and I would advise against it, but they still were very insistent. So I did it, and I never even got the results that we're seeing at Clint's. And I think, caveat there, at Clint's is a very unique pond in that we have Floridas and Northerns, and I'm positive they're Floridas and Northerns. They're not, I can trust the genetics and where I got the fish. We have a discrepancy in genetic, makeup that I've really never experienced before. Whereas most of the time, the fingerlings you get from hatcheries are F1s.
Right. And that's, go ahead.
Well, they're more consistent.
Right. And so that's kind of the cool thing about that accelerated pond too, is that it's going to have Northerns, F1s, and Floridas. Now, we didn't tag them because they were too small.
Right.
But I imagine we'll see discrepant. Like, we'll be able to pretty well guess.
You will.
Size-wise, you'll have probably 3 distinct size classes, at least for the first 2 years, on which ones are which.
Yep.
So
you will.
It'll be cool to see that going forward. But
yeah, those F1s are just so aggressive and grow so fast. I've had like 2-inch F1s go to 2.5. Actually, the fastest I've seen them go is 3 point in a standard situation, a standard, not something that's just like way, like where the fish hatchery just put 10 fish into a threadfin shad pond, and that's different. I'm talking about a normal or relatively normal stocking rate.
Right.
The F1s, I've seen them go 3 pounds in 12 months.
Yeah, that's
stupid.
That's big fish. Yeah. Especially when,
some
of the clients you deal with, they want the biggest bass they've ever caught is like 4 pounds. And, they're hoping to catch big fish. And it's like, oh, dude, you have no idea. Like, just wait. It won't
Yeah.
take long and you're catching bass bigger than you've ever caught before.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of people just don't understand how fast bass can actually grow in the right conditions because so few people ever fish lakes that are managed for the right conditions. I mean, I growing up, I didn't know they would grow that fast because I fished a bunch of bass crowded ponds. We'd go out and
Mhm.
catch 20 fish in 30 minutes, and it was fun, but they were all the same size. So, it wasn't until I went to school and actually learned a little bit about aquatic ecology that I was like, oh, or actually started growing fish from larvae to, juveniles. And I was like, man, okay, fish can grow fast, especially when you're putting
Yeah.
food to them. So,
Yeah. 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 That's very observant and well done. I did not, I wasn't where you are at your age, I guess is the best way to put that. It took me a number of years working for myself and doing field work on my own to figure that out. I kind of fell into that whole, hey, let's put some 8-inch fish in here and see what happens. And literally, like, you go get those year and a half old, we'll call them 8 to 12s. Usually don't get them 12, but we'll just say they're 12. And then, let's just say they're all 8. Well, after a year, they're like 12, 13 inches.
right.
They didn't do anything compared, to what we're getting at Sugar Hill and what I've seen plenty other places, just stocking them at 2 inches. And if you look at the cost discrepancy between a two
Oh,
inch
yeah.
bass and an 8-inch bass, it's like stupid amounts of money to buy an 8-inch bass.
Yeah, and I think the only way that might work is if you could actually buy, like, say you stock Clint's Pond, and when those bass got 8 inches, you harvested them and then transported them. So they're not very old.
Right.
They'll probably do better that way because they haven't lost a lot of time. But I still think, like you said, I think there would be a difference. Like if you could perfectly replicate 2 ponds and you stocked one with older fish or not, they don't even have to be older, but like 8-inch fish that even if you could get them where they weren't stunted versus fingerlings, I'd be curious to see if with those fish being a little older, having performed in a different environment, if they would still slow down compared to the fingerlings they got put in. If you could create that perfect scenario, you would never be able to, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever really done that. I've just noticed that it's like if you take those advanced fish from the hatchery and put them in, and 12 months later, versus you're always better off with the fish that cost $1 or $2. They're
Oh
bigger,
yeah,
healthier, stronger, and again across the whole population, better. You don't have 20-30% of the fish population that didn't really seem to grow for
right.
whatever reason. When you get them small and put them in, they all really grow. I can remember one pond that I stocked. This is wow, some years ago now. I'll be dating myself, but he was insistent. Let's get the bigger ones. Let's get the bigger ones. And I said, I promise you don't want to do that. And he's like, okay. And he actually listened to me, and they were like $1, for the fry. And I put them in June when they, became available and big enough just to move from the hatchery. As soon as the first week they were available, I rode down to Owen Williams and I got them and I put them in. And I didn't hear back from the dude. He didn't call me, and I told him to keep me updated. Let me, give me. He didn't. And I was like, well, who knows? It's kind of, and it was like 11 and a half months later, I had a message on my machine. That was back when we had answering machines,
Yeah.
And, and I was like, oh yeah, that dude, I forgot about that dude. And so I hit him back up and I was like, hey man, what's going on? And he was like, how big should these fish be? And I was like, well, I mean, every pond's a little different, but we did it right. So I'd be really disappointed if they weren't like at least 12 inches long, but they can be considerably longer than that. And he's like, well, And this was like 11 and a half months after stocking. So it was like, put him in June, and it wasn't even the next June. And he went down to, and it was a property that he didn't live at. So he had not been there at all, is what it was. That's why I didn't hear back from him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it was like a vacation type spot. He goes, man, I just went down to the pond. I just caught 3 bass. And these were F1s. But he said, the first bass I caught was 15 and 2 pounds. The second bass I caught was 15 and a quarter and 2.2. And the third bass I caught was 15 and a half and 2.5. And he was ecstatic. You know, he's like, I'm so glad I listened to you and just put these fish in. And I was like, yeah, I promise you, if we stock the adult or the advanced fish, they wouldn't be 15 inches in 11 and a half months. They don't do that.
Yeah. And their maximum size, you know, they lost, if you're buying them from a hatchery, they lost a year's worth of growth. So if they're 8 inches and half a pound at a year old, when they could have been 2.5 pounds at a year old,
Yeah.
you lost 2 pounds off of whatever they could have been, you know?
Yeah.
If not more, because now they're not going to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not worth moving them. And the worst part is when they're getting moved from heavy bass crowded environments where, you know, people, they catch like an 8 to 10 inch fish. That thing might be 5 years old. You have no idea.
Might be 10.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And they
Just
don't
'cause
do
it's
well at
small.
all in that situation. And that's another thing guys never consider, is that it just doesn't compute with them that a 12-inch fish could be 10 years old.
Right. Yeah.
Or
You
8
can
years old.
put a fish in an aquarium and not feed it, and that thing will live for like 4 months. I mean, with absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have to move much. So, you know, they eat a little here, a little there, just enough to stay alive. And that's all it takes. I've seen some very disturbing pictures of bass that you look at them and you're like, man, how are they alive? You can basically see their skeleton and they're still swimming.
Yep.
So
that's kind of the problem that we have with bass and alerting guys to the situation, because the bass will not starve to death. They're so tough.
Yeah.
They'd be better if they would float and be dead. And then guys would go, oh no, there's a huge problem. My bass died. You know?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And if there's any bluegill in there, they can spawn just enough to feed the fish that are in there. Not enough to grow them, but enough to keep them alive.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, they pretty much don't die. A few of them maybe, but not the majority.
Yep. That's all right. So let me go back. We got a couple questions coming through, right?
Oh, okay.
Mike's got a 22 acres and he's got a bass population seems perfect. He's got a good mix of sizes. He's got you got crappie, perch. I'm not thrilled about that, but you don't catch any small ones. All right. Well, at 22, I mean, you're getting close to where you can kind of support a crappie population in something that size, but I have certainly seen even lakes up to 100 acres that I wish there was no crappie in. You would get much better bass growth without the crappie. So on the flip side of that coin, I've also seen really nice bass and crappie kind of blend together on 25, 30 acre ponds, where the crappie don't absolutely decimate their growth, you know, and you get some decent fish out of it. But I still would not want the crappie in there. And Mike, I would highly recommend in the springtime, when the crappie are kind of up around the edges and they're easy to catch, you know, that spawning period for them, harvest as many as you can. You're not going to you can't keep too many, really.
No.
And you'll see an improvement in the size of the crappie, and you'll also see an improvement in the recruitment of your bass. And the problem with that is then that becomes a permanent job for you. So say you're going to go bass fishing, but you go out there and the crappie are on fire. Well, you need to put all your bass tackle up and you need to work those crappie down on those days, because there's going to be days where you don't even see the crappie. There's been days in 22 acre lakes, like this time of year, that I put an electrofishing boat in and you can't find them at all.
Yeah,
right?
they'll go too deep. Too deep. You're not going to find them.
You won't find them. And I've literally had a couple lakes, and again, the school of hard knocks, where I sampled them for 2 years, but I didn't sample them early enough in the springtime, and I didn't even know there's crappie in there. But my bass were showing kind of that 85% relative weight, I'd say average somewhere in there. And you're like, man, what is up with these bass? What is the problem? And you'll also notice it too, kind of like what we were seeing at Sugar Hill, where there's kind of gaps in the forage, in the bluegill forage. And it's like, why are there so many dang gaps? Like the bluegill don't seem as abundant and not as healthy either. Like when you calculate the relative weights of the bluegill, you're not getting great relative weights there. And it's because the crappie are also competing with them for their food. That's another thing guys don't understand is those crappie are very good predators, and they're taking out the aquatic insects that the bluegill eat, and they're taking out the fish that the bass eat. So,
Yeah, and they spawn first, so
Mhm.
they'll wipe out your zooplankton population and work their way up the food chain before everything else has a chance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So my advice to you, Mike, is work the perch, work the crappie, feed the bluegill. That tends to help when you've got the crappie won't take the feed, but the bluegill will. So your bigger, heavier bluegill will have bigger spawns and put out more than they normally would on feed, and you can kind of combat the crappie predation. But again, I would prefer the lake doesn't have, or the pond. I would consider 22 a pond. Um, I would prefer they didn't have the crappie at all.
Yeah,
You would
there's
get
no fixing that now.
no, there's not. And that kind of brings me back to one of the points that I made earlier this week. These guys seem to think that, and especially on like really big bodies of water, bigger than 100 acres, I've even heard it out here. This is the lake behind my house is 10,000 acres, and guys are talking about the people on the bank harvesting bass and disrupting the bass population. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
that they're taking out too
no,
many fish.
no, they're not. You couldn't get 5 shocking boats out there and capture that enough fish to impact the bass population. They just don't seem to have a clue as to the effort that it takes to actually negatively impact the bass population.
Right. And if you were removing, like, the more fish you take out, the lower your catch rates will be.
Mhm.
So it's going to come to a point where you're not catching very many fish because there's not that many in there. So, if they're still catching a lot of fish when they go out there, it's not the bank fishermen that are causing the problem, like
Mm-mm.
they don't correlate population density with catch rate. And honestly, I feel like most people, that 85% relative weight is where most people think that's a healthy fish, where basically the head and the body width are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's kind of like the average fish that you'd catch in public water nowadays.
Yep.
So most people determine that to be a healthy fish. And that's really not even close.
No, we don't. You and I don't consider that a healthy fish,
No,
but
unless
they
we're
do.
growing trophy bluegill. But
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about growing bass, and that there's a major disconnect right there where guys are holding up fish again, like, oh, I caught an 8-pound bass. Well, you caught an 8-pound bass that was 25 inches long.
yeah, that should have been 10 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. 25, 26-inch fish, and they're 7, 8 pounds. Okay. And they're holding this fish up and they're saying, hey, I've got this 8-pounder. Look how healthy this is. But you're not doing the relative weight, right? 24 or under should be 8 pounds, 25 and above. Now we're getting up to, I've seen 26-inch bass go 13.1.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, not to take away, yeah, that's a big fish, but it's
It
not
doesn't have
in,
the girth.
yeah, it's not in great shape anymore.
Mm-mm. No,
So,
no. So, and that there's a huge disconnect there because those guys don't understand. They automatically equate an 8-pound bass to healthy
right.
just because it's 8 pounds. Whereas you and I are looking at it going, that's not healthy at all. So that's where the disconnect lies, you know. and it's a huge problem. I can't tell you how. I'm probably 1,000 people in the last 4 years have made that argument with me on socials about, well, I catch 8-pounders. Yeah, but that 8-pounder might look good to you, but it doesn't look good to me. It's not even close to good.
Well,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, did you actually weigh it, or did you just eyeball it, because that's a big difference too.
It's like, I mean, and you can, even with those little cheap, just little hook weights, scales that, Rapala makes or whatever, those are accurate enough.
Yeah,
they
you're not
do
trying
pretty
to get
good
to tenth of ounces for
Yeah,
just
if
picture
it's a few
purposes.
tenths off, if it's a few tenths off, it's a few tenths off. That doesn't bother me. But again, if I'm talking about a 25-inch bass that you're weighing at 7.5 pounds, I'm looking at that fish going, that's horrible.
Yeah.
They're looking at that fish going, that's awesome.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And we've caught some shocking that, it kind of, I guess the fisherman in you it kind of hurts to take them out. But we've shocked some that are 24.5 inches and it weighed 5.5 pounds.
Oh yeah.
It had a huge head, huge mouth. It was a cool fish to see. But when you weigh it, you're like, man,
he's
not doing good. He's not helping this lake any. So we took him out. And a lot of people would probably see that and be like, wow, this fish is big. It just needs to eat more, and put him back. And it's like, all right, well, if it just needs to eat more, that means there's a problem somewhere,
Yep.
So now in
why
that case,
is it not eating more? That's another thing.
Yeah.
It's like bass are so consistent. And another thing guys mix up is, just because you're not catching the bass doesn't mean the bass aren't feeding consistently. Bass are going to feed consistently. They're hard to catch, so guys kind of equate that to, well, I haven't caught any, so they're not feeding. No, they're feeding. You just need to change your technique to be able to catch them. So there's that. Talking to Hooking Up here, he's learned a lot, and he's been here consistently, and thanks for that, Hooking Up Bass, man.
He's cool. Holding a nice fish in that profile picture.
Yeah, man. I was actually just talking to him on Messenger today. He's got an interesting situation on, I think he told me it was 175 acres of water up north, where it says clearly up north. But what they've got there, and have you seen this before, man? Because this is really interesting. I've seen it. I've kind of messed with it and done it intentionally a few times, where it's a watershed reservoir for a town, and they let it fill up, but then throughout the season it dwindles itself down, and so you've got a big system that over time shrinks into a smaller system, and they fill it back up in the next season. But again, it pulls back down, and it crowds those fish in. And whenever I've seen that, or whenever I've done like kind of early fall, winter drawdowns, things like that, where you're crowding the bass with all the other fish, that really does skew it towards trophy bass. And I mean, he's catching some tanks. I wish I could copy the fish that he emailed me today. They're absolute just chunk footballs, and it made sense to me because of that crowding process. When you put those bass into a smaller area over the growing season, they're going to be feeding on the smaller bass. They're going to be feeding on crappie. They crush.
Right. Yeah. You basically brought all the food closer to them, kind of thing. And I guess it wouldn't always technically be that way if your population was really messed up, but as long as the population's fairly balanced, I can see how those big bass really just go to work on that. We don't get a lot of intentional drawdowns and stuff because people in Texas, in the summertime, they don't want to have, if their lake's low, they're freaking out because it gets hot and dry quick.
Oh yeah.
Not this year yet, but
right.
But yeah, I can see what you're talking about, how that would be. That it makes sense exactly what you're saying. We don't deal with a lot of that, but
Well, and I don't know. I'm going to make an assumption on that lake that whoever's doing the drawing down, they seem to know what they're doing. You know, they certainly have bass over 100%. The fish that I was looking at looked closer to 115% relative weight today. They or maybe even higher. They were really healthy bass. So whatever those boys are doing up there, they're doing well. Um, I have seen that, but I also have seen what you're talking about too, where if the drawdown is at the wrong time for
Right.
whatever reason, it can jack it up.
Well, and most people here don't actually draw down their ponds because they
Mm.
don't want the chance that it doesn't rain for 4 months and then they have no pond left.
Right.
So, but I know up north that's like a big deal. They do it for a lot of aquatic vegetation management and stuff
Yep.
like that.
Yep. Yep. You're saying 20 might be a little advanced. I don't know if they got quite that old, but I know what you mean, man. They look older. And one thing I've noticed, Garrett, have you seen this before too, where ponds with competing species, let's just say crappie, you'll tend to see 25, 26, 27-inch bass, but they won't go past 7 or 8 pounds. The flip side of that, where you've got huge relative weight, like over 100%, 110, 115, 120% relative weight, but you still can't seem to find one that goes over 22, 23 inches. Like they're tanks, but you can't get them to that 25, 26-inch length. You just don't see them. And I'm describing the lake that I used to fish in Georgia, Commerce Reservoir. I fished it really hard, and a couple of the, I mean, I caught some 24. It was 24 and some change, and it was 9.5 pounds. A couple of them, so extremely high relative weights for that length.
Right.
And that was the lake, the public lake that I saw a 126-inch bass come out that was 13.1, but one, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
they don't seem to put that length on, and I don't know why. Do you know why?
No, I mean the only thing like to me that would be more of a genetic that would be where genetics would come into play. I would think because if the bass is at a healthy relative weight, it's getting enough food, so it's going to grow. It should be growing to its genetic potential, if that makes sense. So to me, that would be a genetic thing. It's not like where people are putting, oh, my bass are small, they're underweight. Let me introduce some Floridas and fix the problem. Like that obviously doesn't fix the problem. But if your
Mm-mm.
fish are all healthy, but they top out at 5 pounds, they're either a lot of males for some reason,
Yep.
or to me that would be genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the other situation where those fish are long, skinny, that's a food deprivation problem. That doesn't have anything to do with their genetics.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially in the crappie.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think they I almost feel like there's abundance of forage earlier in the year and a lack of forage later in the year, and it creates that long kind of skinny fish that it never fills out, but for some reason it gets just enough to put on length but not weight. I've seen that very consistently. It's very strange, and it's something that I really, it's just an observation that I've made from the field, I guess, and I can't really explain why it works that way, but I've certainly seen that where if you could just get those very healthy northern fish or native fish or whatever you call them to 25, they'd be huge. But
Right.
you just seem to catch them at 22, 23, and then 24. And that brings me to Mike's question here. Can a northern bass, go over 12? And the answer is yeah. Actually, I just saw on Instagram, I think it was in Kentucky. Now I'm drawing a blank on where that fish was, but it was north of Georgia. It was a 15-pound northern. And if you look back through the records too, like I think Massachusetts from the 70s has a 15-pound record.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think like a certified where they actually tested it, like DNA tested it, it's like a 14.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean they get up there. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not as common.
Yeah,
But
exactly. I mean, we certainly, where I'm living here in Florida, there's been several over 12 just out of the lake behind the house. Over at Orange, there's been 13s and 14s and 15s caught. They're a lot more rare, but than a 10. But it seems like the Floridas will go north of 10 a little bit more than the Northerns. But again, you're really just dealing with a freak of nature once you go north of 12. And I don't care if it's Florida or Northern. That's a very special fish. You just don't see very many of those at all.
right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what genetics you have. If you put it in the wrong environment, it's never going to get bigger than 10 or 12. So you could
Yeah.
pay $25 for a 1 3 inch fingerling and put it in there with no food and it ain't going to grow. It doesn't really matter. So at the end of the day, you got to start off right. You know, you could put a fish in with genetics that you got out of your creek versus one you paid, you know, really high dollar for. And if you put the high dollar one in a bad environment, it'll perform worse than the random genetics in a good environment. And it'll happen every time. And that's, I think people overestimate the role that genetics plays in the aquatic environment just because, not that they're not important, but they're kind of like the last piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gets in the media, genetics have like a big deal. They're, you know, promoting the Florida genetic introductions through, you know, share lunker programs and what, you know, and those programs are growing big fish. But I think people see that what they're doing in big lakes, you know, 20,000 acre reservoirs plus, and they think, oh, well, then I just stock my pond with 300 bluegill and 100 Floridas, and I'm going to have 10-pound bass in my pond. It's like,
Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
no, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter what those fish are. They don't have food. They can't grow.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, we addressed that.
And it's actually kind of interesting how many people, you know, when you go to survey, like show up to their house and how almost every lake we've surveyed has apparently had a 10-pound bass in it. You know, I don't see them when we're in there with the shock boat, but apparently at one point in time, they almost everyone says they had a 10-pounder or 12-pounder in there. So
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting.
Again, did they measure it
Yeah.
actually, or
Oh,
did they
no.
not? But look,
Definitely
we're
not.
hooking up. He said he had a 7-pounder that was 21 and a quarter. I'm looking at the relative weight chart right now, and 21 and a quarter standard weight's around 5.5.
Yeah, that's a good fish.
That's a unit, and that's what I'm talking about. All the fish he showed me look like that. You know, just pound over. You know, really good. If that fish is 25 inches, you're dealing with a teener.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, again, I think that's where it kind of falls back into the genetic makeup. You've got the right system to grow the big fish, but now you're being limited by genetics.
Right. And I think there's very few scenarios where that's actually true. Like
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, when the fish aren't growing, it has nothing to do with their genetics. It has everything to do with the environment that they're in.
Yeah, definitely. But wherever you're fishing, hooking up, keep fishing there, because if you can pull one, uh, if you can pull one 25 inches long, it's going to be a tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's at 15.8 and MA is Maine, right? Or is that Massachusetts?
I think it's Massachusetts, but I'm not
Massachusetts.
sure.
What's MI is Maine? I don't even know. I don't know
I
the
don't know.
abbreviation.
I'm
But
from
I
the
know
South. I don't pay attention.
there are a considerable number of teener fish from back in the day when people were keeping bass that are in that size class. So to the stuff that I see online, they're like, well, it's a northern fish. It's not going to go past 10. Yeah, nonsense. They can definitely go past 10. I've seen
Yeah.
past 10.
It's at 85% relative weight. That's why it's not going past 10. It has nothing to do with where its genetic makeup.
Yeah, see, he's seen two fish that were just big for any place in North America in that lake. Oh, and you have a herring run. Yeah, see, that helps too. And again, now you're getting kind of like the lake that's behind the house here, where it's 10,000 acres. And when I'm talking about it, that's completely different than a 10,000 acre lake in Georgia. This 10,000 acres has a barge canal that goes out to the St. Johns River that goes out to the coast. So you get pogies, you get threadfins, you get coastal fish that migrate in to spawn that don't really have to do with the carrying capacity.
Right, because they come and they leave.
They come and they leave, exactly. So it's like a bonus, and I think that's something you have to pay very close attention to if you're searching for trophy fish. And I think that's why Rodman in particular does what it does, because it has this huge influx of this migratory pattern of bait fish that come into spawn and leave.
Right. It's like bringing a fish trailer to a pond, dumping a few full loads of bait, and then these are free.
Yeah, exactly. They're just coming in from the coast. What's Frank? Frank, what's going on, man? What you got? I hope you catch the record in Canada, Frank. You deserve it, man. MA is Massachusetts. Thanks, man. Thanks for clearing that up. We don't know what we're talking about. We're Southern.
Yeah, I'm going to say we
don't know what we're doing.
We don't look that far up on the map.
No, but just because even in Canada, like Frank has showed me some pictures, man, where there is some great relative weight. There's some great looking bass coming out of Canada, but again, you're dealing with a completely different system.
Right.
You're dealing with something that you've got pike, you've got muskie and tiger muskie and all those types of, you've got a level of predator that are up above the largemouth, that are controlling the largemouth numbers. So you're not going to see the crowding of the largemouth the way we're describing crowding of the largemouth, because we don't have those larger forage species or larger predatory species that kind of turn largemouth into forage.
Right. Yeah, we don't. Sounds a lot different managing down here. Like a lot of the stuff, most of the general things we talk about apply, but you're right. It's different regionally. Wherever you go, it's always going to be a little bit different. Things in Georgia are different from Central Texas, and it's all a little. That's why you got to know a lot about. You have to really understand the basics before you can go start moving around managing ponds in other areas.
Mm-hmm. And hooking up, kind of touching on what we're talking about. They got a lot of water that does connect to the ocean. And that brings in all kinds of different runs. And also, too, like just to compare it to the lake behind the house here at Rodman, we've got gators, we've got bull sharks, and occasionally you'll even see dolphins out there.
Yeah, dolphins can mess some fish up.
Yeah, dude. Like you can. That's another level of predator above everything. The echolocation on a dolphin, everything's doomed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's a completely different environment than a standard, 10,000 acre lake in central Georgia that doesn't have an influx of anything like that.
Right. Or your 10-acre pond that's in the middle of nowhere, that has it's a completely closed system. It's not getting, it doesn't have a creek running into it, doesn't have any of that. So just a watershed pond. But
we got smallies. You guys have any smallies in Texas, man?
I mean, I know Texas Parks and Wildlife stocked them. They're in a few public reservoirs, especially towards like the Hill Country area around Austin.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not like
very limited.
Yeah. Texas isn't necessarily the place to go to catch good smallmouth.
No, I haven't seen any smallmouth around here ever. Yeah. Oh yeah. I believe that. Well, and then, getting into the Great Lakes, now you've had a situation where you've got a massive ocean-like lake, but it's also been skewed because of the gobies. I've seen some studies. I've had some guys, talking to me about that, and I went and looked it up, and the gobies have shifted the dynamics and the fish species. That they've really taken it over. The fish species have drastically decreased in the Great Lakes because the gobies have displaced them, but the gobies are also great for smallmouth. So for your smallmouth, you're seeing those huge, just massive smallmouth. But if you look at the species diversity of the Great Lakes now versus what it was, say, 30 years ago, it's a completely different system.
Right.
So it depends on how you look at it. If you're looking from like an ecology or species diversity thing, that's bad. It's not bad for the smallmouth, but it's bad for other species of fish. And I mean, again, the Great Lakes, you're talking, God, I don't even know how many different species of fish. So what you gained in smallmouth growth, you certainly lost someplace else in many other species of fish. And I could totally see what he's talking about, where, you know, comparing smallmouth to like a river system versus the Great Lakes. Yeah, you're going to see a huge discrepancy in the size.
That's another reason why you don't transport fish where they're not supposed to be. You know, if you're going to take them out of a pond, just put them on the bank or something. You know, don't put them in a river or a creek or anything like that. Not in public water. They don't, you know, if they're not from there, don't put them there. There's a lot of water bodies, especially rivers and very sensitive ecosystems, that have gotten messed up from the introduction of species that don't belong there. And some of that introduction is from, you know, the state agencies, and they learned their lesson and had to, you know, make up for it. But the random guy down the road that stocks them in there and causes damage, they're never going to find him, or, you know, he's never going to have to pay for that.
Right.
Other people do. So just, you know, if you bought bass and put them in a pond and you don't have the heart to kill them, well, find someone who does, I guess.
I guess, yeah. I've dealt with quite a few guys on the fish that we sampled and pulled out of that 1 acre pond. They were 5-pounders, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they were 5-pounders in that little 1 acre pond because of the trout population that dude was stocking, you know, in the wintertime and getting real big. But, you know, again, yes, they were big, and these guys can't wrap their head around the dude wants bluegill. So the bigger bass had to come out because the goal wasn't growing big bass.
Right. And that's where you have to be completely unbiased when you come in as a professional, because they own it. You're doing what they want, and it's your job to know how to get to their goals. Yeah. Even if your goals are, you know, you prefer giant trophy bass because that's fun to catch. Not everyone likes bass fishing. You know, we have people that come to us for big catfish, sure, which, you know, I mean, big catfish are cool. Big fish of any species are cool. Growing catfish is not as exciting as growing big bass, but that's my opinion, not, you know, so.
Right. Go buy your own lake and grow your own fish if you have
exactly.
a problem with that.
Don't get mad at someone else for managing for what they want.
Yeah. I have run into quite a lot of it's mostly on YouTube. I haven't run it. I think the people that follow along on Instagram are educated enough at this point, and the guys that don't follow and they just don't comment anymore. You know, they don't come on. They look but they don't speak, where YouTube has been a different beast. I'm getting a lot of negativity on YouTube, but I just play it to my favor. I had a guy today doing that stuff to me, and you know, I asked him to elaborate on his shaming. He was doing shaming language on killing bass, and it's kind of a straw man argument where they state a fact, but then they deviate off into a rant, you know?
Right.
And I asked him to elaborate, and he did quite extensively. But, you know, I just told him, I was like, well, for one, I think the part of the comment was, you know, you shouldn't have these dead bass on a viral video. Like, I can control which videos go viral and which don't.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, well, you know, since you mentioned viral videos, guys like you on your writing me a book in the comments are making the video go viral by driving the algorithm. Yeah. So I appreciate your help, brother. You're doing good to the people who will actually sit back and listen and not, you know, pass judgment. He was using some shamey language about us letting the fish suffocate. That we had literally just taken off the electrofishing boat. We did an example, where Alex he was putting fish in the
Right.
mouth.
Yeah.
And then we put him right into an ice bath, killed him, and put him in a fryer, But it was that window where, you're letting the bass suffocate and you're a horrible person and, this, that, and the other. And it's like they're going to a fish fryer, dude.
Yeah. They don't know what's happening.
No.
It's not, they have no clue.
Yeah. You weren't there. And we're certainly professionals. We know what we're doing. Midwest. What's up, Midwest? Good to see you, my friend. Let's see what he's got. Growing up in Michigan. Oh, the walleye. Right on. And steelhead and salmon. You're the black sheep with the bass. Yeah. Yeah. What about the, have you seen a decline Midwest in any of those other species of game fish? Like I just mentioned all the gobies and a change in the thing, in the dynamics of those lakes. Have they lost or the gobies, feeding those fish? I'm just not that familiar. I'll wait for
I'm gonna have to read into that. I haven't paid much attention to, I guess, what's going on up in the north.
Yeah, the gobies have created like a crash in species diversity there.
And I'm sure they came from the aquarium trade. That's another thing. Don't dump your aquarium into natural systems. Just send them back to the pet store or flush them down the toilet. Or
kill the dang fish.
Yeah, don't
be a man. Kill the fish.
Yeah, because you're going to cause way more harm than good. It happens all the time.
It sure does, man. Here, I took a little kind of a paddle tour at the springs. Silver Springs is just 20 minutes down the road. 550 million gallons of spring water a day comes out of the ground down there.
It's a lot of water.
It flows as clear as this drinking water for 5 miles, right? And the guy was talking and I'm just listening, and 80, I think he said 85% of the biomass in that river is blue tilapia. And they're like that, 5 pounds. And you can see it. I mean, as you're paddling along, it's like, oh, look, tilapia. Oh, look, another 5-pound tilapia. Oh, look, another 5-pound tilapia. Oh, look, there's a whole school of 5-pound tilapia, and then every once in a while you might see a bluegill or a red ear. And they're all big, there's not, you don't see for a river, I've done enough electrofishing surveys on rivers to know when you turn it on, it is just, oh my God, look at all the different species of fish.
Right.
Look at all the different size classes of fish. And that river doesn't have it. And it jumped out at me. And then when that guy when the kid he was an ecology kid out of University of Florida was doing it, and he made that comment that, over 80% of the biomass is tied up in tilapia. And then my light just bing went right on. It's like, yeah, the tilapia have that whole river tied up. And you don't have any room for game fish when it gets like that.
Yeah, nothing's eating 5-pound tilapia.
Gators, I guess, or like I said, if you get a dolphin up there, but no, when you've got that much biomass tied up
in a fish that doesn't belong here, really. I'm surprised tilapia are legal in Florida. I'm pretty sure you can stock them in private ponds, can't you?
I believe blue tilapia are what they stock around most places, aren't they?
Well, we have a lot of Mozambique in Texas.
Okay, it might be the Mozambique then. Again, they were illegal in Georgia, so I don't have that much experience stocking tilapia.
Yeah, they're legal in Texas, not Louisiana. But that's why I'm surprised you can stock them in Florida, because the reason they're legal in Texas is because they're supposed to die every year.
Right.
And Louisiana, I guess, even though East Texas and Louisiana are basically the same thing, I guess Louisiana is a little more like they'll probably live. You're going to have more instances in Louisiana where they might live than you would in Texas. But that's why in Florida, I'm surprised, they're legal.
Well, I think Florida, you know, it's such a different environment here. You know, the weather's warm virtually all the time, and like, you know, they got snakeheads, and again, perfect example, like the peacock bass were introduced by the state of Florida back. I don't know. I read it at the thing, 70s, 80s. I think they started introducing peacocks. Um, I think to try to combat some of the other exotic fish, but there's also, you know, huge snakeheads here as well.
Oh yeah, Florida has all kinds of invasive species, and it's
Yeah.
people dump. Yeah, they got it's either introduced by the state or someone had it in their house, and now they don't want it anymore, and
Yep.
now there's a bunch of them there too. Because most people have tropical fish or tropical pets, and Florida's tropical, so they
Yep.
don't die.
Nope. Yeah, they sure don't. So Midwest is saying the gobies, they didn't expect the or they did not affect the pelagic species like AOI. So you still got salmon, and salmon and trout are doing good. You know, the ocean freighters, right, right, and well, and then you get into like the mussels too, like the zebra mussels, where that's operating on a whole different thing. Are they affecting fish per se? No, but they're filtering the water and affecting the plankton bloom. So they're clearing the plankton bloom out, which is then, you know, greatly negatively impacting all the fish because it's the base of the food chain for all the fish.
Right.
So, you know, that's not good.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts I think that get overlooked because most of the time what people focus on is what they catch, and those aren't, that's later down in the food chain. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Hooking up saying he found one almost 25 inches dead. Yeah, I would definitely work that lake hard, bro. And with oversized baits, you know, try to get those big fish to trigger on something a little bit bigger. Yeah,
that's scary.
I think you're right, Frank. I think it's the ships and the ballast water. I've read that. I don't know it from experience, but I have read that they've got a lot of invasive fish from that. All right, make sure we don't have any more. Oh, look
Yeah,
at
it's
all.
kind
Yeah,
of a shame how many.
I know, man. It really is. And you know, I've even seen guys here, you know, catching these big snakeheads and then releasing them.
Oh, I know. I see that
It's like,
on some
oh,
of the YouTube fishermen. They're like, yeah, these are invasive species. They're not supposed to be here. And then they put them back. And I'm like,
yeah,
wait, what? Why? Just leave that thing where you were just on the bank. Leave that thing there. Why'd you put it back?
yeah, shank it and let the turtles eat it, let the gators eat it, whatever. Why are you putting it back alive? Again, it's just a disconnect. And I guess simply put, for every 10-pound snakehead, you're taking away a 10-pound bass. They eat the same things.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like that 5 pound snakehead is eating a lot of fish. Don't put it back.
Mm-mm.
But
Mm-mm.
what can you
Yeah,
do?
I don't even know how to pronounce that. Quagga, mussels. Look at there's mussels I've never even heard of up there.
Yeah, I've never heard of those
Brown
either.
gobies, water fleas, rusty crayfish, wonderful. Um, yeah, they've definitely that's along the lines of what I've read too. Midwest, they're. Oh, I didn't mean to take that down. They've impacted the Great Lakes in not such good ways. And unfortunately, there's really not anything you're going to do to correct that. You know,
No, like when it comes to water, once there's a species in there, there's not really a good way to get rid of it without killing the whole thing and starting over.
right? And
And
you ain't
that's
doing
not
that in
happening.
Lake Michigan, you know.
No, no.
So it is what it is.
And I think that's what people don't understand too when they release fish or move fish. Like, oh, it's just a few. It's like,
Mm-mm.
yeah, but just a few can quickly change. Fish. Most fish have thousands of offspring at one time. That it doesn't take long for them to populate in an environment that they can be successful in. with the exception of live bears, that's about it, that don't
Mm-hmm.
have very many offspring.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
even interestingly enough, even mosquito fish are invasive in like other countries. They're having problems with like the little gambusia that we just neglect,
Really?
we don't really care about. I
Yeah.
don't remember the exact location on it, but yeah, they're like some of the most problematic species in the world as
No
far as
kidding. I did not know that.
like small fish. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We learned about so many little fish that I didn't really apply to what I was going to do, so I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
make sure that that information stuck. But yeah, you have to look at that. I don't remember the exact details, but yeah, they're problematic in like other countries because they're really aggressive, even though they're
Yeah.
little. So they're
Yeah.
out competing like other minnow species
Right.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were thrown everywhere from the limited amount we learned about them. Just, I think science, there's some old stuff from like the 30s and stuff. That's why they call them mosquito fish. They stocked them because they thought that they control mosquito larvae and control malaria, to go
right,
and diseases that mosquitoes. But come to find out on the newer research projects, like just your regular bluegill actually eat more mosquito larvae than mosquito fish do.
yeah, they don't. Yeah, they're not. I've been to a lot of ponds and they all have mosquitoes and they all have mosquito fish, so they
Hmm.
definitely don't eradicate anything.
No, no.
And a lot of that, keeping mosquitoes under control is just vegetation management.
Mhm.
Take away their place to hide, and you're not going to have as many of them anyway.
Right.
So,
And again, that's something that guys are kind of lost on. I can't tell you how many guys have hit me up over the years wanting to stock mosquito fish as forage. And I'm like,
oh, I see people
what
sell them.
size bass do you think eats that? Exactly. You're feeding bass that are going to be consumed in 15 minutes by a larger bass if you have them. Like, why are you even trying to feed that size fish? Like there's a disconnect on what big bass forage actually is.
Right, and that's people will go to their ponds and they'll see mosquito fish swimming around. They're like, "Oh, there's bait everywhere.
Hmm.
My bass should be growing. I see bait all the time." And it's like, no,
I mean, do you know how many of those it takes to make 10 pounds?
yeah, and how much work it would take for that fish to eat all of those.
Hmm.
Like that fish would get eaten by something else in the process, trying to hunt mosquito fish in 3 inches of water.
Yeah, it's like running a marathon to eat an M&M.
Yeah,
You're
it's just
not going
not
to
gonna.
gain weight that way.
No, and that's like, yeah, if you're gonna feed small bass and you want minnows to do it, use fathead minnows. Don't bank on your mosquito fish. But even then, it's one of those things where after those bass have started to grow, you don't need fatheads anymore. You
No,
know,
no. Again, like the situation that you just described, where you're putting in 1 to 3 inch bass. Yeah, fatheads are awesome. They're easy for those little bass to catch. As soon as they can graduate up on them, that's a good forage kick for them. But once they've gone past that, you don't need them anymore.
right? Yeah,
You
they have to be the dumbest fish I've ever seen. I've
know?
watched them swim in schools on the surface, and they're getting picked off by bass in the process, and they just keep
Mhm.
swimming. Like, don't move. They just keep going. I'm like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
wow.
Yeah, they get smoked. I mean, they have no chance whatsoever. But again, that's another thing guys don't understand. In ponds, nothing has a chance against a largemouth.
No, that's why you have
They're
to control
gonna
it kind of
dominate
correctly.
it. Yeah, that's why you have to. That's why you have to control the largemouth because they are dominating that system. Um, Joseph's got a good question. Should you be keeping your limited bass or catch and release? That's a great question. And based on my experience in the South, you should be keeping your limited bass every time you go.
Yeah,
Catch and release is kind of a fallacy. Catch and release got started with tournament bass guys when the tournaments first got going, late 70s, early 80s. They would come in on my personal opinion is they still don't do a great job with their fish handling, but back then it was horrible. And the tournaments would come in, they would catch a bunch of bass, they wouldn't handle them properly at all, and then they'd put them back in the water all dead, and the local fishermen were super pissed.
right. Yeah, they were
So
just mishandling fish, killing a bunch of them.
Killing a bunch. And, that's just bad. That's bad for the PR of the tournament.
Right.
They didn't want, they didn't want the perception of the tournament that's coming in and killing all the fish like that. So they had to change. They had to kind of inform their people, look, we have got to get these fish back in the water. We can't have them floating dead at the ramp where we're releasing them. So these guys have this complaint. So catch and release was not born through scientific research. Catch and release was born through public relations for professional bass fishing tournaments.
Right.
And they had the biggest platform for the longest time. So that kind of ingrained everybody's mind through the 80s, 90s, and even all the way through till today. I mean, I still have guys come all the time, believing that. And it's really kind of not true, based on my electrofishing experience across 20 years in 10 different states. Just generally speaking, you should be keeping your bass. The limits of bass that are legal to keep, you should be keeping. It would only make the fishery healthier. But again, if you're dealing with thousands of acres of water and you've only got a few fishermen keeping bass, you're not doing anything. It's not going to change anything.
No.
There's a huge disconnect. Like, you have to, it takes a massive amount of effort just to change a 20-acre lake that's crowded. You double that, triple that size, you go up over 100 acres. Nobody has the budget to pay a guy like me or Garrett to come out to harvest enough bass out of 100 acres to make any difference with an electrofishing boat in a week, 2 weeks. Nobody's going to pay you to do that much electrofishing. It's extremely expensive. It's, man hours and days of work. And still you would not remove enough fish. So it's a big part of what I'm doing now and just trying to inform guys. We need catch and kill tournaments on some of these fish where they literally need to bring the limit back and not put it back in the lake.
Right. The only bad thing is with the tournaments, they're usually targeting, you want to catch bigger fish. But yeah, you're right. There needs to be more management implemented in the tournaments because those guys are catching a lot of fish in a short period of time. So they could really make a difference, or, have them catch and keep their limit, have them work with the managing agency for whatever that lake is, whoever's overseeing it, whether it's Texas Parks and Wildlife or Louisiana or Georgia, and like figure out what their goals are. And like, hey, when y'all are out here and y'all catch, 20 fish all day and you keep the 5 big ones for your tournament, we'll also keep your limit in this slot limit and you'll help us cull fish that we need to take out.
Yes.
But there's not really any management involved because that gets things complicated, I guess you could say, because then people have to weigh and measure and do a lot more where they're just trying to catch fish. So
yeah, it reminds me of Florida's great for doing creel surveys. They have people who just ride around. They don't even check your fishing license. They don't come on your boat. FWC will pull up along next to you and they'll just quiz you on what you caught that day and how many fish you caught. And I was out there, I think it was this spring. I was just running some jerk baits around the pads. I caught a couple fish that day and they were like 15, 16 inches. They were definitely in the keepers. I didn't keep them. I'm guilty myself. I didn't feel like cleaning them. I pitched them back. And the biologist was actually the guy who normally did the creel surveys. I think quit. Maybe he passed away. I'm not sure. But it's rare to see the main biologist doing a creel survey. They usually have that delegated down.
Right.
But it was the biologist for the area was out there doing a creel survey because he needed it. He needed somebody doing it. So he went and did it himself. And I was talking with him and he said, did you keep any bass? And I said, no, I did not. And you could see it in his face. He was disappointed,
Yeah. He's like, come on, man. You
know what you're supposed to be doing. And again, I asked him, I was like, is that something you see? And he's like, yeah, we can't get the guys to keep any bass at all. Which slows that smaller size class of bass growth down. So instead of that bass reaching, say, 3 pounds in a couple years, it's taken 5 years to get to 3 pounds because they're crowded in that slot limit. And that's exactly why they have that slot limit. Like if you go up to the lake and you see it and it says you're allowed 5 fish, all of them can be under 16, but one of them can be over 16. They're telling you on the sign. We kind of have a population skewed towards smaller fish. That's why the slot is skewed towards smaller fish.
Right. Yeah. They almost need to just put the data chart there. Like, look, this is why we have the slot limit, because you see how high the population is, like the bar graph
Yeah.
showing.
They really, that's a great idea, actually. And I still don't know that it would matter.
No, probably not. Because people think when they're out there, oh, it's small, put it back so it can grow.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a disconnect there. They make the assumption that bass have unlimited forage, and they don't.
No,
Each
especially
size
not in
class
the
of
ponds.
bass. No. And even in reservoirs too, and they're encouraging the harvest. And then the funny thing is too, is then the finger gets pointed right at those guys. Well, all these bass are small. What are you guys doing? Well, what are you doing? Did you know how many guys kept their limit out here this year? You guys could be out here catching your limits and helping.
Right. Yeah.
But
They run the shock boat in that lake once every 2 to 4 years. They're not doing anything. They don't have time. I don't know how it is in Florida, but in Texas, there's like regions. So you have a biologist that oversees like 8 reservoirs, basically. So each year they're doing a couple different ones with electrofishing, and they're doing the report. It's different things happening in each reservoir, but they're not out there once a month culling fish. They don't have time for that.
No. And even if they did, it wouldn't matter. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
you need a huge amount of effort. Actually, Jason told me when I was talking, Jason Dotson. He's the head of the Florida Bass Research. I'm trying to get him on, but we keep missing each other. They have 100 biologists for 8,000 lakes in Central Florida.
Yeah.
Again, you could put 100 biologists and 100 shocking boats and turn them loose full time, and they wouldn't harvest enough bass to make any difference. It has to be a public effort. You need
thousands of people that fish over the summer. Those are the ones that can keep fish and make a difference.
Yep. And I don't know, even if in my lifetime, because I'm still, I came out of school in '96 and put electrofishing boats in then, and we had stunted bass populations, and not only has nothing changed, it's gotten worse. And for all the time, since then, 30 years or so since then, 28, I guess, I'm still dealing with guys who are hollering at me about keeping a bass. It's the same ideology from decades back. And hopefully it looks like, with us doing this kind of thing, I've noticed on the socials, there are a lot of guys that are going, into bass harvest. They're talking about proper management. You got Rudd and Oliver Nye out west, and guys that are going around and actually talking to biologists and getting the right information out there. So I feel really proud about that we're starting to see a kind of a movement in that direction.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot more fishermen. They may not be. I mean, I guess Alex and Oliver, they're both pros.
Yeah,
I don't know Oliver that well, but there's more pros or influential fishermen that are starting to go that direction. I think Tyler's Real Fishing. I don't know him. I don't know if you've ever talked to him, but I've seen him interview Stephen Barden a few times, and I think he's kind of more. He's in the same. He understands like, hey, we have to harvest fish. If we want to grow big fish, we can't just keep putting them all back because something's got to give. So.
Here's a good question from Alex. Flipping Kicks, my guy over in Sugar Hill. When's the best time of year to electrofish, Garrett? What do you think about that?
Well, it kind of depends. Spring, if you're electrofishing for largemouth, spring or fall is good. I would say fall is probably better because you get less of a skew in relative weight from that pre-spawn. You know, in the
Mm-hmm.
spring, you're going to have females are going to have more weight on them because of that pre-spawn egg weight. So
Mm-hmm.
for bass, probably the fall. For harvesting crappie and getting crappie data, definitely in the spring. If you hit them when they're up shallow, you can make a mess with crappie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Outside of that, late summer, you're probably not going to get very many. If you get a lot of crappie late summer, you got a real big problem on your hands in whatever reservoir you're in. So, any cool season is definitely less stressful on the fish. So
Mm-hmm.
spring and fall are like the big two seasons when they run. But I would say probably to get your best data with the least relative weight skew would be early fall.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. That's when our our electrofishing boat didn't move until the fall term at Georgia. You know, um, you've you get to see you get to see how many bluegill spawns you got
Right.
the season, and then you get to see the gaps in that, and that's kind of one thing that we did see at Sugar Hill. We did see a little bit of a gap we had plenty of like 1 to 3 inch bluegill, but then that 3 to 5 inch class, it wasn't where I wanted to be. And then of course around the feeder and all around the pond, there's plenty of 5, 6 inch plus bluegill that were originally there. But I was not happy with the numbers of 3 to 5s. And again, that's going back to I've had a couple spawns. I think 3 spawns in 2 years. It looked to me like we had a fall spawn on some of those bass out there at one either last year or the year before. But the gap in the forage base is your first indication that you've got too many bass. They've literally eaten all the 3 to 5 inch fish out of it. So what does that tell you? That tells you the bass with a mouth that big, about a 1 pounder, has eaten everything. Because when it doesn't come up in the electrofishing survey, you don't have very many.
Right.
And that's a kind of a red flag waving in your face once you kind of understand the dynamics. Hey, here's a problem in this size class. So, we pulled a few bass that day. Clint's pulled a few more 1 pounders out as well. And we're trying to get about, in a 2.5 acre pond, we're going to get about 31 pounders out of there this year. And again, in a 2.5 acre pond, that's something that we can easily control. 30 fish harvest, that's not a big deal. Like one guy can do that, you know. Whereas if you take that and make it 250 acres, now you've
Yeah.
got a lot different situation as far as being able to harvest and remove enough fish to even make a difference.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's
Belly
a lot
full
of
of
work.
belly full of crawfish. My buddy Mickey hit me up. He went to Lake Lanier, which is a highland reservoir, pretty famous highland reservoir in northern Georgia. And I was really surprised. Mickey's old school. He's a old farm boy from South Georgia. He will put a fish in a cooler, and he went and caught some striper and took them home and cleaned them and sent me a picture. And the striper were packed full of crawfish.
Interesting. That's not, you wouldn't think that'd be their go-to. Well, yeah, it's not normally their go-to.
In a blueback herring lake with threadies and herring and gizzard shad, and then he's got a limit of striper, and every striper's packed full of crawfish.
Yeah,
I was
that's very interesting.
I was interested in that. I was like, wow, that is interesting.
Hmm.
Well, Alex is one of the guys we tried to get over to this year, and that didn't work out. He's got a 2.5 acre pond not far from Clint's, so it looks like we might have one more for you to electrofish next year, and that'll be good, man. That'll help. He's got some forward facing on his yak, and he's been working. He's got 2.5 acres of water, but he's got crappie.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and he's in a homeowners association, so he can't drain. He's not going to get that permission, right?
No,
So
you don't get permission to do much.
no, exactly. But he does have a feeder going, and he is seeing an improvement. We swung it around. What was going on there is they had a lake management company that was coming out, and if you could get them out there once a month, you were lucky. And they're coming out with some cutrine and some pond dye, and so we took it from that to a feeder and some harvest.
Right. Yeah, they're really fixing the fish population with that cutrine and pond dye. I tell you what, that's a recipe for a lot of situations. We see it all the time. Like, oh yeah, they spray it once a month for me.
Yeah, it's good if you like that, like pretty kind of a look. If you, I don't really prefer dye for aesthetics. It doesn't. But again, maybe I'm biased because I'm a fisherman and I'm looking for productivity in my fish population.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I don't really like it. I never really use it that much. And small stuff with like cyanobacteria problems, ponds under an acre, absolutely go with the dye. You're not managing those fisheries for bass anyway. But
yeah, we have a lot of businesses and stuff that have it, the fountain and the dye. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Keep it looking pretty.
That's fine. And honestly, I have seen it be effective, in those situations.
Oh yeah, it does work.
Yeah, irrigation type ponds where they're using the water, and you really don't want herbicides in there because they're going to be irrigating onto their common areas and stuff. Absolutely, it has its place, but again, you see that kind of misinformation spreading out towards sport fishing ponds where these guys are dyeing their ponds. And
yeah, well, I've seen a guy in one of those Facebook groups that says he's a pond manager, and I've seen him post multiple times where he says, "Oh, dye your pond. It doesn't hurt the plankton. It controls the weeds, so your fish will grow the same, but you won't have any weeds." And I was like, dude, if that were true, no one would ever have to hire anyone ever again. Everyone would dye their pond, have giant bass, and never have vegetation problems. Like, obviously that's not true. I don't know where you got that information from, but you need to try again.
No. Actually, one of the first ponds that I got to work on, our series of ponds that I got to work on, it was Kenny Rogers' old place close to Athens. He bought a big farm out there. He actually had a golf course out there and several thousand acres of land.
Dang.
And Dr. Gilbert, who was, I didn't get a master's degree, but for lack of a better term, my major professor, because he let me take pond management for 3 years and work with him, was managing his golf course ponds and his other ponds around the property. And I'm not going to name him, but a famous television fisherman in the area at the time decided that he was going to go into pond management. And since he was on television, and again, it goes back to that bigger platform and the assumptions that people make. Well, he's got a big platform, therefore he knows what he's talking about.
Right.
He took that job from Dr. Gilbert and started managing Kenny Rogers' farm, and Dr. Gilbert left. Now, Dr. Gilbert was fertilizing the water, and they went from a fertilized situation where the productivity's up here. This guy stopped the fertilization and added dye.
Yeah, so he just nuked.
Dude,
he probably cut it into like a fifth of what it was, if not more.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. And then that happened in like the late 80s, early 90s, before I was even in school, right? So then Kenny Rogers sold that place. He didn't own it anymore. And the person who did own it got back in touch with Georgia and allowed us to go electrofishing out there again. The worst bass those bass, and then one other guy that I know, he was a fishing guide on a big lake, and he was taking 8, 9, 10-pound bass and bringing them over to a 20-acre pond and throwing them in as a professional fishing guide, and just taking public water fish and putting them in 20 acres of water because he was trying to guide people on that 20 acres of water as well.
Right.
And those were the worst bass I've ever seen. But the second worst were that farm that Kenny Rogers used to own. I think the relative weights weren't above 68%.
Jeez.
They were,
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
they were skeletons, dude. And of course we had the data
From the
prior,
past.
from the past to what it became. And he showed it again. He, like you described earlier, he put it up on the board and was like, this is what we were sampling when we were doing a fertilization program. We were doing selective harvest, we were managing the ponds properly. And then let's look at the data that we just collected after they stopped a fertilization program and added dye. And it was just like, oh my God, it's horrible.
Yeah. Well, and then when you get away from a fertilization program, the dye probably helps because you control vegetation somewhat with that. But when you get away from that, it's not just, you can't always just go back and start fertilizing again. Like once you stop, you have to figure a lot of stuff out before you can try to start again.
Yep.
And you might not really be able to. It might take a whole lot more money and work to get that started again than if you would have just kept up with it to begin with.
No, and actually our recommendations that weren't taken, of course, were to drain the ponds completely and just start them from scratch again. Those fish were so stunted and so bad and so old, there wasn't even a point in making that attempt, really. You're going to spend way more money and effort than if you were just to hit hard reset and do it over.
Right. And that's a hard pill to get people to swallow, is to kill it and start it over, because a lot of people don't want to do that.
No, they do not. Which
I kind of get it, but at the same time, I think that's where platforms like yours and what we're going to start doing with a lot of these new lakes, showing the potential and how fast fish can grow, to show that, just because you kill this pond, it seems like, oh man, you're gonna have to wait a really long time before you get bigger fish, but actually you won't. 2 years you have 4 or 5 pound bass, versus if we keep trying to cull fish out of this pond, it might take you 5 years before you get those 4 or 5 pound bass.
Yep.
So it's not, you can start showing data that says, no, it's probably better to actually kill it, and then they'll have something to look at and go, okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
But just telling people something without having a way to show them, it's hard to get people to listen that way.
It is. And well, I can, from personal experience, I can tell you, and I'm so thankful to have Sugar Hill, and I'll definitely, anything you need me to post, and we can talk about what you got going as well, and to show folks, because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
But getting somebody who's never seen it to get on board, that's a hard pill for most guys to swallow.
Exactly. And that's where social media will have power, I think, that you can start contradicting stuff. And you not necessarily being full-time doing this anymore, it helps to have other guys out there that are willing to work with you to promote this stuff so that you can get content. Because how hard it is to come across brand new ponds anyway. You get a lot more that have already been established. So to not be doing it full time and to get content on new ponds is probably, with the exception of Clint, it's not easy to come across per se.
It's not.
So, that's one of those things. But we're having a lot of just this year, we're getting a lot of new properties that are all a little bit different. They're all different sizes. So it'll be cool to show, over the course of time, like this is what, 11 acres looks like versus 5 acres versus 8 acres versus 2 acres. It's all going to be a little different, and what you can do is all going to be a little bit different, but at the same time, it's going to all be the same, if that makes sense. It's all going to have the same management goals, the same basic steps that are just tweaked a little bit. And that'll be cool to show people, like, you can grow big fish in small water. There's a reason why yours aren't growing, and it's, X, Y, and Z. And then they'll have pictures to show it. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too. I think that's going to be awesome. And just to give, like, I've done many 10-acre ponds that way. And again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about a guy holding up an 8-pounder that's 26 inches long and thinking it's a good fish. I'm talking about you're say 3.5, 4 years in after stocking and 10 acres of water, and you're catching 30 to 8 pound plus bass a season.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
There's a difference between one, like
Yeah.
one 8-pound fish doesn't make it a trophy lake.
No, not when you know. Like I've had so many 10-acre ponds that were like, if the dude goes there and doesn't catch an 8, it's because the fish just absolutely were shut down that day and they didn't catch anything at all. But I can't tell you how many guys that, listened, and they're like, man, I can't even believe this. Like, we literally catch an 8-pound plus fish every time we go fishing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's a big difference there. Like some of those fish, I think I've sent you pictures of them, it's an 8-acre pond. I think it's a little bit, it's like 8.5, but we did a survey and we had 4 8s, a 7, a couple 5s and a couple 4s, and like
Yeah,
that in 8 acres, that you're pretty much catching quality fish every time you go fishing,
absolutely.
versus we shock 8 acres and we get 1 5. And the guy, a lot of the, some, we get some that they just bought it and all they're catching is dinks. So when they see that 5, they get excited, but it's like, dude, this is far from what it could be. Yeah, it's cool, but you got one out of, you have 4,000 bass in here and you have 1 5-pounder. That's not good.
That's
That's
not good at
not a
all.
healthy fishery.
No.
So, but yeah, it'll be exciting. I'm looking forward to being able to continue to do these and show new stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
How big is too big to manage? Well, there is no too big to manage, but
Yeah, at 108,000 acres, it's going to do what it's going to do no matter what people keep, pretty much. But at the same time, something that size, it's going to throw off some big fish.
yeah,
It's different than pond management completely. At the same time, though, look at that lake. Look at the data on that lake from like years 4 to probably 10 after it was impounded versus now. And I think for Texas, one good example would be like OH Ivy.
oh yeah, that thing's throwing giants right now.
Just people are just reeling in 10, 11, 12-pound fish every day,
Yeah, I think a 15 just came out of there a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that. And that's kind of an idea. Is that 20,000 acres?
Honestly, I have no idea. I don't
I,
know much about that. Like, it just the last few years did it start to kick off, and I hear people talk about it, but I don't have time to go fishing as much as I'd like to, so I haven't been keeping up.
Yeah, well, I think OH Ivy and Orange Lake, which is just west of here, are very similar in that they almost lost the lake due to drought.
Right.
And then rain came back, filled it back up. So it's a big lake, but it's kind of working the same way as Sugar Hill is as a small. It's a new system pretty much. So it's got that kind of new lake effect, and that's what's going on there. And just go ahead and watch it. I can call it. I've seen it so many times. I know OH Ivy is not going to throw fish off like that forever.
No, probably 3-4 more years, and it's going to start going downhill.
Yeah,
unless people keep up with management, which we'll see.
Maybe. Yeah, we'll see. Again, I think it's 20,000 acres, unless I'm reading was wrong. What it said on the internet. It was a pretty big body of water. It will produce nice fish, and it's not like that's going to go completely away, but it's not going to put off fish the way it's putting it off now. Lakes have a life like we have a life. We start out good and we go downhill, and it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's why you need management.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's hooking up's bringing up a good point. It's got a lot of grass in the place that he's catching, and it's untreated, and the bass love it. And so when I had the other biologist on here, Hokey Fish Biologist, that follows along on Instagram as well, he came on and did a live. For anybody new, you can go back into this live feed and look at that. You'll see a major disconnect there where you had, say, something like hydrilla, and they treat it and they change it completely because the hydrilla kind of goes away, and guys don't catch as many fish as they were catching because the hydrilla, the weed lines changed, and the bass spread way out, and they're not concentrated on those areas. Literally because the shallow water areas are probably mostly choked with hydrilla, and the bass can't go and hunt in those areas.
Right.
So they get out along those weed lines so they can hunt and have the availability to hunt out there. But when those weed lines disappear, those bass disperse and they're not concentrated like they used to be. And since the fishermen aren't catching the fish, they equate that to the fishery being ruined.
Even though the health of those bass probably improves when that hydrilla is managed.
Exactly.
You don't need vegetation to grow fish.
No.
Fish don't eat plants.
No.
Not the native ones here.
No. And like the lake behind the house here, Rodman, there used to be a lot of hydrilla in the lake. And since I moved here, I haven't seen any. Actually, just within the last 18 months, the eelgrass is starting to come back. They had a couple of hurricanes that blew up in here and just decimated the eelgrass. And the general consensus around here when you talk to the fishermen is the Florida guys sprayed all the grass away, and that ruined the fishery, when in fact it was the hurricanes that came in here, brought tidal waterway in here, changed the chemistry of the water, and agitated, did something that killed that eelgrass. And again, it's same as the hydrilla, changed the dynamic of the fishery. The bass spread out, and they're not catching these big fish like they used to catch. Therefore, somehow, some way, they want to point their finger back at the state guys and say they treated it and they ruined it, when in fact that's not what happened at all.
Right.
And the hydrilla has not recovered in Rodman. And I personally, this is just a guess, but based on the numbers of those 5 to 8 pound blue tilapia that are, feeding their plant feeders, I think that has something to do with where the hydrilla went. Because
I don't know enough about blue tilapia to know if they'd eat hydrilla, but I know they're more herbivorous than other species like the Mozambique, which we use a lot of in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say that it's not them.
Well, in talking to Jason about it, he's like, well, I can tell you that not one drop of product has gone in to treat hydrilla in Rodman. They have not treated it for. Now everybody's pointing the fingers at them saying, you treated all the hydrilla and killed it. They did not do that.
Yeah, which honestly, if we could eradicate hydrilla from the United States, which is not possible, that would not be a bad thing. You could replace that vegetation with a more desirable native species that causes a lot less problems, but that would freak a lot of people out.
Absolutely.
If you told bass fishermen that you were going to go on a mission to eradicate hydrilla from the U.S., people would think you're going to go ruin every fishery.
Yep.
And that they're not going to catch big bass anymore because you're getting rid of hydrilla. But, one battle at a time, right? We got to start getting people to keep fish first. Then we'll move on to vegetation management.
I'm telling you, there's so much misinformation to battle. Oh, Hooking Up's got another comment here. Let's see what he's got. So they drained a pond in 19, rebuilt it. Yeah, 19 up north, you're dealing with a little bit slower growth rate up there, I would expect. And also, too, on the draining and restocking of a pond, doesn't
mean they did it right.
Well, and it doesn't mean like you could be in a situation where it's just not possible to do it right.
Yeah.
There is that. It has to be done correctly. And sometimes that's not possible.
Yeah. Or you can't control what gets put in. It could be connected to a creek, or you might have a lot of people bucket stocking. There's no telling what.
Yep.
Without a survey, there's no telling what's going on in that lake.
Yeah, you nailed it right there, because I've done that in ponds where I've drained them, pulled them down, tried to eradicate the fish population, and there's like a stream feed in it, and you can't get enough water out. Like literally, like I've been on like 5. It's usually generally on the smaller bodies of water, but 5 to 10 acres of water where you go, you start a siphon, you open the bottom up, the drain doesn't drain it quite properly, you know, so you have to do siphons or pumps or something like that. And you wait a week, 2 weeks, and you finally get the water down to the point where, all right, we're going to do a treatment, you know, we're going to rotenone it, we're going to get rid of all the fish. And literally, like, you catch a rain and the next day the lake is full again.
Yeah.
And you've got to wait again to pull it down. That's what I'm getting at. Like, you never want to try to eradicate a pond that's even halfway full. You need puddles of water. You need it down to almost, if you can dry it out, that would be great.
Right. Yeah. Plus, if it's going to get water inflow like that, there's fish coming with it from somewhere. So you could kill it, but whatever's in there is probably going to come back in there. So
I've seen that too, where you got a pretty decent kill. It looked like everything went well, but there is a feeder stream, and then some species of unwanted fish came down the stream before you could even get the fingerling bass in there.
Yeah, and messed it up.
And spawned and completely disrupted the whole balance of the system. So again, it goes back to, you have to do it right. And some places that's just not possible.
Well, hey man, I'm about to have to take
You got to
off.
cut out. Well,
yeah,
we're going on 2 hours anyway. I think that's good. Let me make sure. Jeff's saying he saw a tilapia die off a few weeks ago. That's probably heat related, I would think.
Yeah, we're getting, with the heat and that hurricane, we had a lot of pond turnovers and stuff.
Yeah. Those kind of things don't really send me into a panic attack too much. The lake will probably be fine. Of course, they can have just complete kills as well that really do disrupt them. It's literally like a pond or lake by lake situation on fish kills like that. So it's kind of hard to say, but
once again, that's where a survey is.
Yeah, I wouldn't chalk it up to a total loss, but you never know. But we certainly enjoyed talking with Garrett, and thank you for joining us tonight, Garrett, on this quick live. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to come back with, hopefully we'll start getting some reports on how the bass are looking that went into that accelerated pond. I'm going to task the landowner with some fishing.
Nice. So, I think you're going to start seeing some good results, by the fall, and thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to cut it off so Garrett can get out of here. It's getting late, and I appreciate it, and see you guys next week.
All right. Later, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.